thing about doing it, Lewis, the place is evil. Sometimes dead is better.
Have a happy Halloween. And remember, sometimes dead is better.
Scary times. Put together by executive producer and senior producer Tom Danheiser. Tom, you're doing a wonderful job on this program tonight, my friend.
That's nice of you to say. It's Halloween. It's fun.
Well, you're also working on Christmas and Thanksgiving stuff and all that.
I like theme shows. I think they're fun, and I think music adds a lot and recordings add a lot, and it's just a lot of fun.
The calls and the stories are amazing this year.
You know what? Every year they get better and better. They really, really do. There's a lot of cool stuff out there.
How about that hotel story where the guy got killed drinking booze, and then he comes back and haunts everybody?
That was amazing, and the lady who saw her son in the fire.
Yes. Those are all great stories.
And I got to say, I'm truly sad if indeed that is true about JC.
Well, we got to check into that. Thank God Louisa from Kentucky is alive. You had that scammer called you and killed her.
We can't lose everybody.
So, maybe JC would call in and say, I'm alive.
Well, I did send him a text, so we'll see.
See what happens. Does his phone work?
Well, it went through, so yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to Ghost calls for the rest of the hour. And let's pick it up by going to John, truck driving in Ohio, to get us started. Hey, John, welcome.
Hi, George. Man, I'll tell you what, I'm becoming a regular. You got me hooked.
Super. It makes your trip go quicker.
Yeah, I'm actually from Toledo, too. I'm going up to Detroit tonight, taking Pepsi to a Pepsi plant on Mack Avenue up there. You familiar with that?
I sure am, absolutely. My son's in Detroit right now on business, and he's up there seeing his grandmother, and all is well.
Good. Well, I got a story for you that happened to me probably 12, 15 years ago. I had a metal detector, and I used to go out all the time. And this particular, I think it was a weekend, Sunday morning, and I was driving up the highway, and I'd always look for places. I'd never noticed this house. It was an old farmhouse run down, and it was like hidden behind trees. So I thought, I'll try my luck here. I started finding certain things. Well, I dug up, and I found this, looked like a medallion or coin. It had Zodiac on the front with the sun, and on the back, I couldn't make out. It had some lettering, and it was kind of oxidized. So, okay, I took it, washed it up, turned it into a keychain. Well, within about a week or so, some bad things started happening to me. I had gotten into a car accident. 3 weeks later, I lost my job, and then 12 months later, my wife and I were going to get a divorce. And we were separated. I started saying something to a friend, and they go, God, it sounds like someone put a curse on you. And when he said that, I thought, you know what? Ever since I've had this thing, that's what's happened. So I took it to a pawn shop to try to get information. The guy said it had no intrinsic value. I said, can you give me a date? He said, probably early 19th, 20th century, And he said, I said, I can't make out the back. And he goes, it looks like something there in Latin, but that's Stonehenge. That's Stonehenge there. And I go, oh. So I didn't tell him what was going on. So I took it to the priest, my father, and I said, can you tell me about this? I found this. I turned it into a keychain. I told him what was happening to me, and he looked, and he said, that's not Latin. And I said, it's not. And he goes, get rid of this as soon as you can.
Oh, jeez.
Immediately. And his face was somber about it. That scared me. So I didn't want to just throw it on the street and have someone else pick it up and have something happen to him.
Right.
So I go back probably like a few days working my nerve up, and I went to sleep, and something tells me, just take it back. So I went back to the place, and it looked different. It just looked creepy to me. And I went to try to find the place that I dug it up. I didn't find the exact hole, but I went down far. I had a trowel. I went down far, probably a good 8 to 10 inches, and I put it in the hole, and I took a rosary with me, and I put a rosary over the top of it. And then I buried it, covered it up. And it wasn't immediately, but a few weeks later, I got a better job with better pay. My wife and I reconciled. We never got the divorce, and things were better ever since then.
That's amazing.
And, yeah.
What did the priest, John? What did the priest see that scared him so much?
He flipped it over when he saw the zodiac. That wasn't so much, but the lettering. And I don't know. All I can imagine, I thought it was Latin. But when he didn't touch the lettering or do anything, he just looked at it. And I said, the pawn shop said that that's Stonehenge. And he just kind of got a concentrated look on it, and he was trying to make out the lettering. Because it started from the top, like a penny would say, in God we trust. But it would start at the top, and it had these, I don't know if you want to say symbols or lettering, and it went all the way around like a horseshoe. And when he saw that, his face got somber, and he said, get rid of this now.
I wonder if that's satanic.
Satanic, or I thought Celtic or something. But, you know, this farmhouse was way off off the beaten path. And years ago, this doesn't, come back to me until now, but every now and then you would hear stories of where people would make they find animals dead, and they were, double sacrifices. And I never thought, wow, that could have been part of that. But the pawn shop guy said it was, at one point, it was a medallion. But
he probably doesn't know.
No, but he said it looks like it was a medallion, and it was brass. And he said it had no intrinsic value, but, that's when he told me it was Stonehenge. But I turned it into a keychain, and almost immediately I started having that, bad luck. No satanic dreams or nothing like that, but just, and when I did take that back and I covered it, I had a feeling of relief, like wow, I don't know how to explain it. Like something was just lifted off of me.
Yeah, like 20 tons gone. Great story, John. Thanks for sharing that with us. Really appreciate that. Next up, let's go to Robert in New York. Robert, you're up.
Hello, George.
Hello, Robert.
Speak to you again, and I have I think, a very interesting story. A couple of other points I'd like to make after that, but
okay.
It relates to a sacred land of the indigenous peoples of the Onondaga Nation, and this is a place called 13 Curves, and it's on the way to Skaneateles, where the Clintons have vacationed over the past years.
Okay.
And it is a very interesting story that has been passed down generations. But there was a young bride and her husband. They just got married, left the church apparently, and went down 13 Curves on a rainy night, and didn't make it around one of those curves and ended up crashing into a tree and being killed.
Oh.
And as they died, the story is that she still walks at night in her wedding dress, usually in the rain. And I was on my way to Skaneateles, New York at the time, to the lake there, and I was going up Cherry Valley, where it's called Route 20, and just as I come to the 13 Curves, just before that, there's a very steep hill, and there's a guardrail there and a big drop-off where nobody, and this was driving rain, pitch dark, and I'm on my way, as I say, going west, and up this long incline of a hill, and I know it very well, and you could barely drive in the driving rain. However, along the right side going with the traffic next to the guardrail, there was a long guardrail. Nobody would ever get across there and jump off to the side. There was this woman in a wedding dress walking in the rain and trying to be a good Samaritan. As my effort was I went past it and I said, oh my gosh, what in the world is anybody out in the rain like without an umbrella and so forth? So I turned around immediately, did a 180 and came back to try to pick her up. Well, as we were going down the incline, I saw her again for the second time. But then I went past a little bit too far, and I turned around again and came back within a minute. And I turned around and went back to ask her if she would like to get out of the rain and have a ride to her home or wherever she was going. But it was the woman in the wedding dress, white wedding dress, vanished and disappeared, and I couldn't find her. And I went back and forth several times trying to find her. Stopped and looked over the side, which a big drop-off. Nobody would have gone over that railing, and I just looked everywhere for her, and I couldn't find her.
How heavy was the rain?
Well, she has been known to be seen by other people over the years, and I was just wondering also, is there any connection between Halloween and orbs as a perhaps a spirit of some sort? And I was hoping sometime you could have Dr. Jerome Corsi back on to give us an update on where does America stand in our safety regarding the current state of what's on the brink of World War III here, and see what his take is on the transfer or the Israeli conflict there with Hamas, and then Ukraine. Is this not a prelude to what's going to happen here in America? And his take on it as a political scientist. I know him personally. He's a great, honest, a visionary and an excellent analyst regarding the realities of the world today. And I really would appreciate his sharing his insight as to, is America under assault, under attack, or is this training ground, those other two wars, for bringing it here? Was 9/11 just another prelude to war on our front doorsteps here in America?
Well, funny you bring him up, because he just contacted me last week. He has a new book out, so we're working on that. And in terms of orbs and Halloween, I don't think there's any connection between that. The orbs just pop up when they pop up. Next up, let's go to Mary Sue in Wisconsin, east of the Rockies. Hi, Mary Sue. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, George. It's a pleasure, and I'm happy to be on. And my story is more of a poltergeist-type story. I'm retired now, but years ago this happened to me. I was the manager of a very old bar, and it was used to be like an old railway station. They had some railroad tracks that went by it, and they had rooms for rent upstairs, back in the day.
Sure.
And when I became the manager, they said, this place is haunted. And okay, great. Anyway, the one thing that happened while I was there was that the beer delivery guy came. It wasn't usually I'm there, but it wasn't while I was there this particular time. And he went downstairs to the walk-in, and he got locked in. Now, if you know anything about walk-in coolers, there's a push bar. You can get out.
It's like an It's an emergency bar that you push, right?
Correct. Yes. And he said that he was pushing on that thing and trying to get out. And when he finally got out, I guess it was about 45 minutes later, someone went down to see what's taking him so long. And they had no problem opening the door. They tested it. The bartender that was on went inside and said, okay, to the beer man, stand here and make sure I can get out. And everything was fine. And a couple months later, this is what happened to me. I was closing up, and this is a really old bar, very tall ceilings, and up around the edges, there's kind of like a shelf. And there's all these knickknacks and follow-on. There was a wind-up music box up there. I never even noticed it. They had all these different things. You couldn't reach it. It's always been up there, And it was way up high on the ledge. And I was putting on my coat, and everything's locked up. Nobody's there. I took one or two steps towards the door to lock it up. And boom, this wind-up music box fell at my feet. and it broke into like a million pieces.
Wow.
Except for two things that were left that I could read. Apparently, it was around the bottom of the music box, some lettering, and all it said was the two pieces was "help me," and the other piece that I could read said "go home."
Wow. Did you take heed?
Well, I got the heck out of there, I'll tell you. It is now a parking lot. They tore it down, so, but yeah, I then was pretty wary of the ghost where I was a bar manager years ago.
Good for you. I'm glad you're still around, Mary Sue. Wayne in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Wayne, welcome.
Good evening, Sir George. Yes, I had a ritual with my kids growing up. I used to tell them a bedtime story. The favorite was The Three Bears, and I would tell that to them almost every night. They just loved it. I would do a dramatic telling of it. And this one night, I noticed my son was a little bit peaked, and I began tucking him into the bed. And he tells me, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed."
Oh, boy.
So I look underneath for his amusement and see another him, under the bed, staring back at me.
You saw your son under the bed looking back at you?
Yes.
Wow.
And he was quivering and whispering and said, "Daddy, there's somebody on my bed."
Whoa. So the real son was hiding under the bed. The ghostly imposter was on top of the bed.
You got it, George.
Oh, what happened? Huh? Did you look back up and was the entity still there?
I went to bed.
You went to bed. I couldn't go back to sleep. It's a great story. Thanks, Wayno.
You bet.
That's a great story indeed. It's one of a kind. One of a kind. I'll tell you a little bit about what's in store tomorrow night on Coast to Coast, and we're going to come back with more Ghost to Ghost stories, by the way. Jeff Dunn is going to be one of our guests. He's going to be talking about artificial intelligence and what's really happening there, and then we're going to talk about a true story of aliens, demons, and pure evil in the state of Texas with Pat O'Connell, who includes all kinds of things from Utah's Skinwalkers Ranch and things like that. So he's part of the program, and I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be on our next Coast to Coast show. And again, our website is Coast to Coast AM. You can email me through that website and get right to me, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We get about 2,000 emails a day, so sometimes we don't get back right away, but we do our best to try to, or at least somebody will. So we'll be back in a moment with more Ghost to Ghost stories right here for you on Coast to Coast AM, so don't touch your dial. Those of you on hold, we'll do our best to get to all of you.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Trick or treat. Happy Halloween, everyone, from Rosemary Ellen Guiley.
Oh, Tom, that's incredible. You had a little clip of Rosemary. I miss her.
Yeah, so do I. I was going through some old wishes that we got from people from past years, and, she's just such a staple even when she's gone.
She loved the paranormal.
Oh, she did, and she loved Halloween. She loved Halloween. I really miss that lady.
I found her when I was doing my Nighthawk local show in St. Louis, and I was just looking for guests, and I was doing a lot of my own production, and I stumbled across her Encyclopedia of Dreams, and it was fascinating, and I just found her, got her phone number from the publisher, called her up, put her on our local show, and then brought her over to Coast when I started doing it.
Was it sent to you, or did you just see it online?
I saw it at the bookstore.
The bookstore. And you know what? Her husband, too, really nice guy.
Joe,
yeah, absolutely.
Yep, I miss her a lot.
And then you met, let's see, didn't you meet Karen Dahlman, our Ouija board expert, on an airplane?
I was going to Vegas, and she was sitting right next to me talking about Ouija boards, and I went, geez.
You never know how we meet people.
She's still one of the only people who likes Ouija boards.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, huh?
Yep. To the phones we go. Let's go to Jerry in Tennessee. Hey, Jerry, thanks for holding.
Oh, hey, thank you, George. Thanks for getting me on, and happy Halloween to you and all your listeners.
You too.
I had an experience with actual sleep paralysis that scared the hell out of me, and I didn't talk to people about it for a long time until, now that today's day and age, you can get on YouTube and Google anything and then hearing other people having the experience. And I did listen to your program last night. Basically, it was the fall of 1984. I was in the United States Navy. I was part of the pre-commissioning unit for the USS Missouri, and I was one of the first arrivals at 32nd Street in San Diego. Well, they had to move us off because out of 32nd Street because they were running out of room with the barracks, and they put some of us with good behavior out into the beach at Oakwood Apartments. And make long story short, they would give us a per diem check, we would pay our rent. And then one night, it must have been October, November, December, sometime of '84, before I went up to Long Beach in January of '85 with the USS Missouri being outfitted in Long Beach Naval Station. But I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't move. I was completely and totally paralyzed. I couldn't move my head. I couldn't move my neck. I couldn't roll over. I couldn't do anything. I just laid there, and I was like, oh my God! And I felt like I had a huge weight on my chest. Now I didn't see anything. I didn't I've heard people say they saw like a hag or nothing like that. But it just felt like like there was a huge weight, heavy weight on my chest, and I could barely breathe. And I had the sensation that somebody was watching me, but I didn't see anything. Now, I can't tell exactly how long this lasted because it was so terrifying that it may have only been a couple of seconds, but to me it seemed like it was hours. But finally, and I'll never forget it, it seemed like it took so much effort to be able to turn my head. And I worked so hard to finally turn my neck, and I could look at the clock, and then finally it sort of wore off. It's sort of like when you sit on your leg too long and your leg goes to sleep. Like
gets a little numb, yeah.
Yeah, and then it started well, that's what happened was, and it finally started coming back, and then I was able to move, and like the other individual, I think that called in about sleep paralysis, it scared me. I got up, I didn't go back to bed. I had probably say for several days after that, I was scared to go to sleep because I didn't want it to happen again. It was so utterly terrifying. Oh. And that's when I didn't talk about it for a long time. I thought people would think I was crazy, but it did turn out to be, now that I understand, well, that's me and other people have had it too. It's called sleep paralysis. Now, I'd like to tell also your listening audience real quick, I did have a paranormal experience with my father when he passed. If I could tell you real quick, and I'll be quick for your other callers.
Sure.
Callers in January of 2007, after a period of depression, my dad took his life in the garage of my parents' house.
Oh my God!
And yes, and terrible thing. Hope it doesn't ever happen to anyone that has to experience that. My dad kind of got the idea he was a terrible father and husband to my mom and my sister. And to make the long story short, I think that's what really drove a lot of his depression. And then he also had problems with tinnitus. He spent many years cutting down trees with a chainsaw without very protection. So he got terrible tinnitus. So that may have been part of it too, because tinnitus can cause.
It drives you nuts.
Absolutely, and he would sleep with like the radio on or with the fan on because it was that bad. But to make a long story short, it was several years after my dad died, and I was about 9 o'clock. I was out of my parents' house. And my mom was away. She had gotten a boyfriend, but I would go over and check on the house every once in a while for her. And so I was there at the kitchen table at 9 o'clock at night, and I was just watching TV. And then I heard a toy go off, just this noise of a toy. And it was just like just the sound of like a little like a toy car, I guess, or something along those lines. Right. So I started looking for it. I started trying to follow it, and I found underneath one of the chairs in the living room, and this was kind of one of those chairs that has like I don't know what you call it, but it's like cloth all the way down to the floor. Mm-hmm. And I lifted up the cloth and I reached underneath the chair, and then I found it and I pulled this toy out. And what it was a little semi truck about maybe 6 to 8 inches long of a BP truck. It was white, and it had the little green BP sign with the yellow BP, and this little toy was going off. Now, I thought, if I open this battery and if it doesn't have a battery in it, this is paranormal.
You're going to freak out. Yeah.
I'm going to just freak out, right? Well, here's the thing, though. I did open up the battery. It did have a battery in it. And when I took the battery out, it did shut off. But when I checked the battery was expired. And then when I put it up to my tongue, it didn't have much of a charge. So I put it in another 9-volt, like a little radio. But it didn't turn it on. It was so weak that it didn't power it up. So I don't know what that was. Could that have been paranormal? Could that have been something some way my dad was reaching out to me to let me know he was there? I don't know, but to this day, it's just something I really wonder about, if that was my father reaching out to me with that toy.
Quick question. Was he a truck driver by any chance?
No, he was not a truck driver.
He was not. Boy, if he were, that would have been a definite sign, to be sure. Bob in North Dakota, thanks for calling. Hey, Bob, welcome.
George, happy Halloween the day after. It's been a pleasure. I've been a long-time listener, 14, 15 years, and first time I'm actually on air, so welcome.
You too, my friend. What do you got for us?
Well, this goes back to 1993, about 30 years ago, Fargo, North Dakota. We had a couple of roommates. We lived in an apartment, and we decided we wanted a house, a little bit more privacy, so we looked in the paper, and back then it was just ads Sunday and Monday and Wednesday, looking for the classifieds for a house to live in. Well, we found an older one. It was a 4-bedroom home. Moved into it. A month or so went by. His girlfriend came from northern Minnesota because he was from out of town.
Okay.
And we found out she brought a Ouija board.
Oh, boy.
With us. And I know your feeling of a Ouija board. I've heard all the stories and who you spoke to in the past. And that night we played Ouija, and the lights flickered off and on. The water in the bathroom actually turned on, the hot water faucet. There was an old one where you had to spin it. I mean, there's no easy way to turn it on. And then we also found out there was somebody with us in the house. It was answering yes, it was answering no. And it spelled out a person's name named Zach, Z-A-K. And Zach was 8 years old, supposedly. And, we thought it was kind of cool just going through it. We were 25 years old, young.
Sure.
We thought we'd keep going. We played for the night, went to bed for a while, and we got up again. The water started running again, and we heard footsteps from the bathroom across the living room. And it didn't seem like a large person at all, but it was loud enough. And we had this old Berber carpet. And that's kind of what it sounded like. We knew it was boots.
That's a great story.
The family room light flickered more. It just kept happening. Didn't think much of it. And the second night, once again, we played the Ouija board. She pulled it out again, and she asked all the questions.
Go.
It just seemed she knew what was going on. I guess the more you ask it, the more happens, supposedly.
Whatever the entity was, he was coming through that board, Bob.
It was coming through the board, and then he left for the weekend. The next weekend, I watched his dog. Dog stayed with me. The night that I went to sleep, George, the dog started freaking out at the foot of the bed because he stayed with us, and slept with us in the bed and everything. And he's growling. He's really antsy. And looking at the doorway, and I look, and we loved this old house. It was dark. We loved to sleep in it. And I saw like a smoky swirl or a black swirl in the doorway headed up towards the ceiling. And this was a lot blacker than the old dark room that we lived in.
Yeah.
And it kind of moved its way on the ceiling. It swirled over above me. And I remember putting the covers over my head. I was cold. Blankets were actually covering my mouth and my nose. And then in a split second, it seemed like it swirled. It disappeared. It looked like up into the vent, into the heater vent. Dog instantly shut up, calmed down. I had popped up out of bed, turned every light on in the house, and everything seemed to be normal back then. And everything. We never did play the game. Again, they returned home. I told them what happened. Didn't really believe me. I guess we spoke about it a little bit, but I keep wondering. There was an old tornado in Fargo that passed through in 1957 that leveled North Fargo.
They had some people in fatalities.
Yeah, did somebody get hurt? Did a child get hurt or something? That I still wonder to this day, and that was 30 years ago.
That's probably true. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate the call. Next up, George in Georgia. Welcome to the show. Hey, George.
Hey, George. It's an honor to speak to you.
You too. Great name, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Ditto. I listen to you every night on my 1937 Crosley Super 6.
Well, a classic.
I love old radios. Anyway, I live in Savannah, but I grew up in Miami in Coral Gables near the old Biltmore Hotel. And I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was built in 1926.
It's an old one. I've heard of it, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's very haunted. I've got quite a few stories about it, but one in particular, we used to put our John boat in the Gables waterway and paddle up behind it, and we'd run across the golf course to get to the hotel. Now, the hotel became a VA hospital during World War II, and it closed in the late 60s. And they used to have a morgue there, and the morgue had mysteriously caught fire and burnt to the ground.
Oh.
And this is back in the 60s. It was full of bodies. And
when it burned down?
Yes, sir.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it was still the hospital was still open then. And I mean, the place sat vacant for many, many years. Several decades before the city of Coral Gables started renovating it, because it's on the National Register of Historic Places.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember one night we got into the hotel. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s. And we were on the second floor, and me and a friend of mine were going, down the hallway. And, of course, we're not supposed to be there, obviously. And we're opening doors and looking inside. The place was still full of hospital stuff, hospital beds, whatnot. And as we're walking, we hear footsteps. And my friend will say, stop, listen. And we heard footsteps, and then they'd stop. And we were the only ones in there. And
clearly they were footsteps. You heard those.
Absolutely. I mean, we both just looked at each other. We had a flashlight. We each had a flashlight. And, I mean, we weren't there to vandalize or anything. We just were looking around. I mean,
yeah.
Like I said, we were teenagers, 15, 16 years old. I mean, this was a cool place. I mean, I remember before they raised the level of the pool, I mean, the pool was 21 feet deep. It was fed through the Gables waterway.
That's huge.
Back in absolutely. Back in the 1920s. I mean, Johnny Weissmuller used to give exhibitions there and whatnot. They had beautiful grandstands. I mean, this hotel has a 13th floor. There's actually a 13 in the elevator. So, but we went down this hall. We opened every door, and we went through another door to another part. Well, when we turned around after we had listened, we had heard the footsteps. We turned around to start leaving, and my friend stopped me. He said, "Look, don't you see that?" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Every door is closed."
And you opened all of them.
We opened all of them,
and didn't close any of them.
No, sir.
Somebody did, to be sure. Well, we're wrapping things up, folks. That's Ghost to Ghost for 2023. We'll do it again next year, my friends, and I'll be back with you tomorrow night on the program as well. And thank you for participating. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burles, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.